Just start talking so we got some audio.
Yep, we got audio. Well, this is what happens when you leave the guy who doesn't know technology in charge of technology.
We just need to have a little powwow one night, man. We just need to coordinate and sit down, spend like an hour or two together and figure it out. Yeah, we're live right now. We're good. Everything's working at the moment.
We need to hug it out, man.
It's all good.
All right, let's see how long this one lasts.
Yeah. Well, this is a good way to test it with, 3-4 viewers. And I got one right here in the room with me, so it's a great way to test it.
Yeah, good.
Before you have 100 or 200 followers, you know what I mean? Then
y'all done sucking?
Maybe.
We're live right now, Jacob.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Jacob.
Give us an intro, man.
Yeah, hurry up.
So the Twitch chat shows up in the live chat on Riverside too. That's pretty cool.
Great.
All right. Well, here we go. Welcome back to the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy. And today, we're celebrating our 4th birthday. The terrible fours, if you will. Right? The ferocious fours. Wow.
That's what they say.
I was gonna say I don't think that's whatever.
It is what it is.
The
Happy birthday,
fours.
fellas.
Happy birthday.
Wow. Jeffrey, you are muted, my friend.
He's always muted.
Yeah, I'm just making sure I'm not blowing out the speakers, man. That's all.
All right. Well, today we are celebrating our 4th birthday. We've been doing this podcast for 4 years now, which is pretty incredible. I'm surprised that we've lasted this long, Jake.
Yeah, I'm surprised too. We should have called it quits years ago.
You're an asshole, but I love it.
Yep, that's me.
Well, let's see. We've done some pretty cool shit over the last 4 years. Not going to really do a recap for those that have listened to the show for 4 years, forever. You guys know our story, and I don't really feel like we need to repeat it, but I just wanted to say thank you to everybody listening in. It's because of you that we're still here. Because I'll tell you right now, if we didn't have any numbers, if nobody listened to the show, we wouldn't be doing it.
That's right.
Takes up an entirely way too much time. But
we do it for the 5 fans. We got you.
We do it for all 5 of them, and
right.
Jeff. We do it for Jeff too.
Thanks, man. This is all for me.
This is the only way we can hang out with you.
This is my simulation. Or is it your simulation?
We're the NPCs.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I identify as an NPC.
We have done some really cool shit, man. I mean, honestly, like this podcast, it got me like a little mini vacation, right?
Yeah,
like
dude.
That was the first time in my entire adult life, basically, that I flew somewhere to like hang out with some people.
And you didn't die?
Yeah, man.
Nice.
Well, maybe I did. I might have shifted into a parallel reality.
Well, this one sucks too hard, so I'm sorry.
Well,
there's a parallel world where Jeff did not make it.
Yeah, that's right. You shifted into a parallel world that's worse than the original.
It's like that Rick and Morty episode. We say Parmesan.
What's
that's
that?
funny.
We say Parmesan.
Parmesan?
Yeah.
Parmesan.
For those that don't watch Rick and Morty, it's Parmesan.
Hey, you guys got to approve. You got to approve the post. Crystal's trying to post a link to this live stream in the Facebook group. So if you guys could approve that, it doesn't have to be approved in Shadowban, right? No, I don't have no rules, bro. There's no approvals in Shadowban. Get out of here. I don't censor free speech like that. Let me stop.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't so much that. It was that we were getting blown up by fake accounts,
like bot accounts,
porn on the page. So that's why
that's
switched
not
to
good.
approval. Yeah, that's not good.
We should have like 200 more people in the group, but they all left once porn started getting posted on the page.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had to block that. We had to filter this stuff.
CJ hit me up. He's like, "Hey man, so someone keeps posting porn all over the page. You should probably do something about it." And I looked, and it was a fake account, obviously fake. And I was like, "Oh crap!" So I made it so it's a request to join, and then all that stuff, request to post. So
right on, man. Well, good for you. I appreciate that. Well, we're here to talk about Hollow Earth again, gentlemen. Episode 4. This will wrap up our entire month-long dive into the concept of the Hollow Earth. How do you guys feel like it's going so far?
Thank goodness.
Yeah, you're done with it, huh?
Oh man, already? That's crazy.
Asshole.
I named my Minecraft realm Agartha.
Ooh. I do believe that we may touch on the topic of Agartha today. Very briefly. I don't dive into it too much. I have a whole section on it. Never mind. Well, this is actually a short episode. This is only 7 pages long. So, yeah, I'm gonna disappoint
Where is that in the
everybody.
drive?
In the finished episodes in my folder.
Okay, I like to read along, otherwise I get lost.
Are you the one that does that?
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll highlight like a sentence and it'll throw me off. Please don't do that.
I've never done that before in my life.
You're such an asshole.
I'm gonna put buttholes on something.
Please don't.
Yeah.
Trying to be professional here. Trying to act like we know what we're doing. All right. You guys ready to jump in?
Yep.
All right. I have a small intro for this one. While I was editing part 3, by the way, I totally forgot to say part 3's intro. So it's going to be the only one without it. But this one does. All right? All right.
Yep.
Good. Ever since the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945, marking the beginning of the end of the Second World War, strange objects were seen flooding the sky in numbers never before seen. Where were they coming from? And why were they there? In our previous section titled Hollow Earth 3 Exploration, we touched on the Admiral Byrd's story of his encounter with a mysterious and advanced race of beings that dwell in the hollow of the Earth. These humanesque beings called their saucer-shaped flying machines Flugelrads, and the explanation that was given to him for their appearance on the surface of the Earth was that the inner Earth civilizations were watching the surface closely due to impacts that were felt in their world when the atomic bombs Little Boy and Fat Man were detonated in the Japanese cities 2 years prior. Imagine the destruction the force of an atomic bomb would create on the inner shell of the realm of the Hollow Earth. It makes sense that the elderly being told Byrd to pass along what he had witnessed in the inner world city and to mention that it would be their last warning against atomic warfare. Anywho, we already covered that story. Today, we dive into the subterranean levels of our planet for the last time to discover the world of those that live beneath our feet. Who are they? Have we met them? What are their capabilities? Does the inner world consist of flora and fauna like the ones on the surface of our planet? All this and more today as we dive into the Hollow Earth Part 4, Life and Flying Saucers. Welcome back to Infinite Rabbit Hole. Crystal, it tests good. Thank you. I actually got that in the Riverside chat. I love that. Yep. That's so cool. That's freaking awesome. I don't even have to have Twitch up. All right, guys. This is it. Jake, I know you're sad.
I
I know you're not sad because you just said
I'm
it. It's kind
distraught.
Man, I'll tell you, I cannot get over the subject that I'm working on right now. And I don't want to say what it is. Jake knows what it is. I talked to him about it last night.
This better be a better episode than the Admiral Byrd story, because I didn't believe that for a second.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. Some people believe it. Some people don't.
Those people are fools.
I believe that he saw something. I just don't believe that story.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I don't know. I like the first topic you have towed up since I have the notes up for everyone listening. I like to read along because otherwise I'll get lost because I'm dumb.
Yeah.
Jeff knows.
He said it.
He spent 4 days with me. He's like, gosh, that guy's so dumb.
That guy's so stupid. God, I wish that guy wasn't here. All right. Jeffrey, anything to say, sir?
No, I'm just, I'm ready, man. Let's hear it, dude.
All right. Go. Stories of giants. Since the time of Byrd's discovery, there have been many people that have come forward and claimed to have accidentally traveled into the inner earth when they were exploring the Arctic. A Dr. Nephi Cotton of Los Angeles reported that a patient of Nordic descent made a claim that he and a friend of his from Norway made a trek to visit the North Pole. They packed their boat full of months' supply. They packed their boat full of a month's supply of food and water and set sail towards the Arctic. Instead of finding the area of the pole that they were looking for, they were surprised to see a large mountain on the horizon instead. The pair decided that they would investigate, and as they got closer, the weather turned warm. In fact, too warm, and they were forced to strip out of their winter protective gear. The ocean soon became a lazily moving river, and the men enjoyed the light of a large stationary sun as they traversed the waterway through enormous vegetation and animal life on its shores. Then they met giants. The civilizations of these enormous beings were in the form of towns similar to those on the surface, and the men were in awe at the technology that was being used in the shape of a conveyor of sorts that transported the beings from point A to point B. Now, side note, if you listen to our coverage on the Indrid Cold story, you would remember that Indrid was also part of a race of larger beings from a planet with an intense sun and a conveyor-like transportation system. Much of these descriptions are retold in the coverage of the Carl Higdon abduction as well. The man claimed to have spent almost an entire year with a family of these gigantic beings and was incredibly impressed at the size of their fruit compared to the ones common on the surface. One particular example he told was that the grapes in the interior lands were as big as the oranges from the surface. Another report was made by a man by the name of Olaf Jansen of Norway in a book titled The Smoky God by American writer Willis George Emerson. In this book, Olaf describes how the sun in the interior of the earth is smaller and duller than the one on the surface. The way he specifically described it was as if it was hidden by a layer of smoke all of the time. Jensen, as a young adult, and his father took to this journey due to telling of a land of warmth beyond the ice and cold of the Arctic. The pair spent 2 years traveling through the inner earth and exited in the south pole of the planet. By the end of the journey, Jensen's father had passed away, and Jensen eventually settled in America, where he would pass on his story on his deathbed, as well as the maps that he had drawn up throughout his life of lands he witnessed during the multi-year journey. The story also goes on to tell of large human-like beings with incredible scientific advances, who fly saucers, who live 400 to 800 years on average. Side note, this is the same lifetime of a Lanulosian from the Indrid Cold story. All right, guys. So
they're connected.
You think so?
Yep.
I think so too. That's kind of why I did that, because it's very, very similar. And did you get to listen to the Carl Higdon episode? I know you weren't in that one.
Probably not. It doesn't sound familiar. But
no,
Lanulus is definitely on the inner Earth. We cracked it. Cracked the case.
I mean, how hard would it be to believe that if alien abductions were happening, that instead of going off planet or to another dimension, it would be simple to just fly into one of these Symes holes in the South or North Pole?
Be much easier and quicker.
What do you think, Jeff?
If you're like an advanced alien race or something, right, you're not going to populate the surface. I don't think that's what we would do, right? If we end up making it to Mars, they're going to build their cities, but most of the infrastructure is going to be underground, right? It's not going to be subject to like all the radiation and, you know, micro meteors and whatever else. So why wouldn't super advanced beings be inhabiting the interior of planets that they're doing whatever they're doing at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my exact thoughts, man. I don't want to get too far into the Injured Cold story. I mean, we basically covered it twice. We did a 4-parter once with Asher's, and then I did a remaster of it. It was the episode voted upon for a remaster. Basically, the gist is that Woody Derenberger, a man from West Virginia, was traveling alone at night when a craft came out of the sky, and a human-like person, or human, basically, came out of this craft, came to his window, and started talking to him. And then this led to a entire story of these two basically living their lives together from two separate planets. It's a pretty interesting story. By all means, if this is the first episode of Infinite Rabbit Hole you're listening to, I highly recommend going to check out that series. I've specifically called this out because there are parallels. So I wanted to highlight that for the listeners. But
I agree.
Other than that, you guys ready to move on? We're like already a fourth of the way done with this.
Nice.
Yeah. Ice, flora, and fauna. Yet another famous argument by the Hollow Earth model comes in the form of the existence of icebergs. Icebergs are primarily almost fully freshwater. A few examples exist that are salty in composition, and this is believed to be due to extreme temperature fluctuations that causes a flash freeze and hardens the ice before the salt can be removed by natural processes. To explain better, saltwater has a lower freezing point than freshwater, but all saltwater has freshwater in its composition. Therefore, when saltwater freezes, the freshwater freezes first, and the salt particles are pushed out by the process since they can no longer bind to the hardened freshwater ice. This is why a vast majority of icebergs are fresh instead of salty. Another way for an iceberg to form is from a chunk of an ice shelf breaking off and falling into the cold ocean. Ice shelves are made up of two things: ice that is created in the same way as the freshwater icebergs that we just discussed, and by the continuous packing of heavy snow that becomes a dense layer of ice over time. And all snow is fresh water. So therefore, any of the ice produced in this way is also freshwater ice. The only way to get saltwater ice is to rapidly drop the temperature so fast that the process of salt being removed by the ice never has a chance to happen. But the Hollow Earth theory sees the existence of icebergs as a sign that freshwater rivers from the inside of the planet flow towards the Arctic and Antarctic holes, and when the freshwater meets the frigid saltwater, the freshwater then becomes frozen almost instantly. The model also describes a thick layer of ice referred to as the Great Massive Freshwater Ice Pack, and is where the physical point where fresh and saltwater meets, creating a large ring of ice around the perimeter of the hole. This is the official entry point into the subterranean world, and is also to blame for mammoths that have that have been discovered frozen in chunks of ice from all around the world. The theory is that the mammoth is actually a subterranean species, and sometimes when they die or are drifted away by the rivers of the inner earth, they get trapped in this ice pack and eventually break off and float to various parts of the world where they can be discovered. While on the topic of fauna, there are many animals that make their homes directly around the area of the North Pole. Polar bears, Arctic foxes, ringed seals, and multiple species of birds call this area home. Some find it extremely difficult to believe that these animals live in this region without migrating out for the brutal wintertime, which find an average temperature of negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. But records show that the temps can get as low as negative 90 degrees on rare occasions. And remember, there is no landmass under the northern Arctic, like there is in the Antarctic. So these animals have nowhere to go in these situations. Hollow Earth theory claims that these animals simply migrate north during these periods and find the warmth they need for survival on the fringe of the inner Earth. And to back the model up, there have been cases where people have witnessed animals seemingly migrating north, such as polar bears, muskox, and foxes, before witnessing their returns in the late spring. And yet another stranger occurrence was when a species of bees was discovered in 2018 in the polar Arctic. B. glacialis, according to atlasobscura.com, is the culprit of many reports of bees being found dead on the frigid ice of the Arctic. The bee has been captured alive and studied and found that in order for the bees to properly fly and live, their wings must stay at a temperature of 86 degrees Fahrenheit to properly go about their day. Another question is, where is their food source? Bees need pollen. Among the strange critters found on the northern ice cap, mosquitoes seem to be even more of a head scratcher. Where are they getting their blood from? All of these can be answered by the Hollow Earth theory. And what about the coniferous tree trunks that are randomly found floating in the northern waters, well past the northern timberline? Why is there evidence of trees found in the area of the world where the nearest tree is hundreds or thousands of miles away? Why are tree nesting birds found in the Arctic summers along the farthest northern tips of the planet? And why do many Eskimo tribes and lore from many Asian countries and Egyptian writings tell of their ancestors who came from paradise lands in the north? Paradise lands of larger than normal gods who lived their immortal lives among lush greenery and heavenly fruit and perpetual sunshine. Some Eskimo lore tells of a comfortable and mild climate with lakes that never freeze, enormous herds of large animals, and people who live for almost 1,000 years. Hollow Earth theory, yet again, has an answer to all of these questions.
Well, that was way more interesting than the Admiral Byrd story.
Yeah.
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 No, I liked it. That was pretty cool. That's a lot to think about and unpack.
Do you see the overlap, though? I mean, other than Bird's plane getting taken over and escorted to this gigantic city in the Hollow Earth, run by advanced beings, he did say that he saw large animals. He saw that he saw freshwater rivers. He saw that he saw plains and mountains. I mean, he saw all this. He saw exactly what was described here.
Yeah, but still, you could poke holes in his thing, or in his story, or his diary, or whatever it was. But that was interesting. I like the animal migration north. It's like, where are they going? Like, to escape the frigid temperatures and stuff as soon as it goes, this. I mean, let's be real, it's a snowy desert, but when it goes into its colder time frames in the year, like, why would they be going north versus south like most animals, which is interesting.
It is. Now, I'm not saying that we can't poke holes in the Admiral Byrd story because there's a lot of holes to poke in it.
Right.
I just find that, it is interesting that his story does share some of the lore that's behind some of these ancient civilizations and what the Eskimos have.
Yeah. No, I agree.
The thing is like there are polar flights, right? So why don't we have good footage of this at this point?
Says the conspiracy theory guy.
Would you believe the footage if you saw it?
Well, yeah, because like that's what I'm looking up right now. There's public polar flights, like
right,
regular schmuck. I could get on a plane right now, so that would tell me that's, if there was. And I know we've talked about this, like the curvature going into the hole would be so big that you wouldn't see it, but from 30,000+ feet in the air, you still don't think you would notice one of these areas like lush or curve weird or something like.
I mean, above the cloud layer.
Yeah, but there's not always clouds, right?
So I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for a minute and say, do you really trust that piece of technology? That it's giving you an accurate path? Especially if it's on a globe, sir?
Considering I wasn't even sure if the plane I was taking to see you guys, like a part of me, like there was 10% of me that was like, maybe I fall asleep before the plane takes off. And it's like the Truman Show. And they like change the set. And I think I'm in Wisconsin, but I'm not.
Hey, bud.
So considering I'm that crazy sometimes, I guess I don't trust anything. But,
Well, I don't know, man. In one of the previous episodes that we covered Hollow Earth, I did talk about a flight from Alaska to somewhere in Norway. I can't remember the name of the towns, but I know Hammerfest was the one in Norway. I can't think of the one in Alaska, but this basically runs a line directly over, or at least the closest that you can get to directly over the North Pole. But the mileage doesn't add up. So
are you going to get into like a flat Earth thing right now?
Sort of, right? I mean, we covered this in shoot. I don't know if it was the last episode or the previous one to that, but I talked about there being a certain amount of miles in the width of the United States, and then I also went and said that these flights that go from this point A in Alaska to point B in Hammerfest, wherever that is, takes this amount of time, and says that it's this distance, where that distance can't be traveled in that amount of time. I don't know. It's strange. I personally think that there is a decent chance that the Hollow Earth exists. Now, whether or not Symes holes are a thing, that's up for debate for me. I mean, just because a plane flies over the North Pole and that happens to be true, it doesn't change my mind on the Hollow Earth being a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, of all the wilder conspiracies, I guess Hollow Earth is still one that I choose to kind of believe to some extent, because I love science or science fiction and fantasy and that kind of thing. So just to think that Middle Earth or some version of Middle Earth exists under our feet, it's cool to think about, man.
He doesn't know what Middle Earth is. He hasn't seen Lord of the Rings.
I've never seen Star Wars either. No, I know that it's Lord of the Rings, but I'm saying, like, to me, Agartha or like the Hollow Earth, these advanced beings. Sure. Like I think of this kind of thing where it's like magical fantasy world versus like a technologically advanced civilization, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I hope that everybody that's listening right now heard you say that you've never watched Star Wars. I don't know how you can live without seeing Star Wars in your life.
Shut up, Jeremy.
What an asshole,
To all you listening, Jeremy has never watched Star Wars, but he agreed that he would if we got up to 150 reviews. So if you're listening to this...
Ratings. Reviews, that's a lot of reviews.
Well, ratings. So if we get to 150 ratings, Jeremy will watch Star Wars, all of them, all at once. We'll Clockwork Orange him with his eyes peeled open and make him watch them all. It'd be great.
Yeah, we're at 96 right now. So head on over to Spotify. It is on the Spotify platform where that is to be. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I don't think we'll ever get 150. I don't think we're good enough for that, to be honest with you. That's a pretty big number. That's like 350s.
Do we know, is there any type of pictures that we could point to and be like, that might be a real picture of an entrance?
It's not AI nowadays? Nothing.
I'm looking for any, a NASA photo or any kind
of... There was a thing going on years ago, back when Google Earth first came out, or along that time frame, where people were unable to zoom in on the North and South poles, and it just kind of blacked it out. Which there was theories about them covering up the science holes with that. But right now they do a pretty good job at their paint by numbers and make sure that it's all covered up for you. But like we said in one of the previous episodes, they don't do so well when it comes to Mars.
I just don't think they're going to Mars, man. I just don't think that they're leaving Earth.
Oh no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I mean, I keep referencing other episodes that we've just covered, but in one of the other episodes, we talked about how somebody, I believe it was, it might have even been Sir Edmund Halley, who believed that all the planets in the solar system were hollow, and not just the Earth. So,
well, yeah, it wouldn't make sense if it was just the Earth, right? It would just make more sense if that's how large bodies were created in space, that they were just created.
It wouldn't make sense if only the Earth was flat.
Well, that's one of those things where the psyop will get you, right? If you have a low enough IQ, the psyop will get you, because people who, well, just not to derail too much, right? But when people say something like the flat Earth, most people immediately think of space, and they think of your round planets, spherical planets, and then the Earth being the only one that's flat. And it's if you think that that's what people are talking about when they're talking about flat Earth, you just totally miss the mark. You have no idea what you're talking. You know what I mean? So it's like a straw man thing. Now you're going to say that it's fake for a bunch of reasons, but you don't even know the actual argument, right? So,
well, the argument is that the Earth is flat and space is fake.
Space is fake. That's the key, right? Nothing. The other planets aren't round. There might not even be other planets, right? It's not they're just out in space and we're just flat out in space and there's edges to fall into space. No, it's no, there is no space. It's either an infinite plane like Minecraft, or it's a giant enclosed sphere of some kind. And I don't know. That's just the argument. I'm not saying it is. That's the point,
We need to revisit flat Earth. It will happen.
My whole problem with that is just of all the, and again, I gotten into it deep, and only a couple of times have people been able to thoroughly present the quote unquote proper model in a way that made sense, and everybody else does a really bad job of it. So it becomes this meme where it's like I said, the flat square floating around the sun and with all the other planets. And it's you just missed it.
I want to get a guest from the flat Earth community that comes on and it just blows my fucking mind.
I can explain the
want.
Model.
Can you?
Yeah. So think of it this way. All right. So at any continent, if you were to travel south from that continent, you would hit the South Pole, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when people come up on the South Pole, it has huge cliff faces. Well, the problem is that you can only see on a super clear day like 14 miles. So it'd be the same thing as you sailing a boat up to a coastline that's like, say, like the East Coast, not like the Gulf of Mexico or something like that. But even then, it probably wouldn't matter. But anyway, so you get up to the coastline. You look to your left, as far as you can see, it's coastline. You look to your right, as far as you can see, it's coastline. It's the same sort of thing, except when you come up to the South Pole, you look left, all you can see is this giant ice shelf. You look right, all you can see is this giant ice shelf. Now, the theory, just like this picture that Jeff's showing, for those of you that are listening, I'm sorry, but the theory is that instead of going south and hitting a, let's call it a circular landmass, which is the South Pole, instead, you're going out, because it's, say, instead of being a globe, flatten that out into a CD. So you're going out, and when you think that you're hitting the continent of, Antarctica, you're actually hitting the ring that surrounds the Earth. Now, the model that's theorized is that ring that goes around the entire Earth, or what we know of as Earth, is like 10,000 miles thick. And then maybe on the outside of that ring, which no plane that we have today could possibly travel that distance, there might be other land masses. So that's when you get the whole extra terra for extraterrestrials. It's not off planet, it's from other Earth, extra terra, right? So extraterrestrials. So that's like the psyop, is that they've been planting us with this whole, like, they're extraterrestrials, and when the thing that they want us to think is that they're out in space, but in reality they're on the other side of the ice wall or the inner Earth or whatever it is.
Now, I was familiar pretty much with all of that. What I meant was, I want somebody to come on and prove to me that that's the model. I see. That's what is real. We're going down the flat Earth rabbit hole again. I've seen the model. I've heard people talk about it. I've heard, the shore of Michigan to the Chicago skyline, and I've seen all that. I don't believe all that, right? Because I've looked out while on a ship in the Navy and saw a boat on the horizon that didn't even touch the water. It looked like it was floating, right? So, I mean, you've probably seen something similar. You've been on to see more than I have. So I know light does weird shit. So if I'm looking,
effect, it looks like it's floating.
Well, that, and then you have Einstein's theory of general relativity, where light and gravity is fucking with things, and
that's exactly how he said it. Light and gravity is effing with things.
If you look up, if you Google it right now, the very first page of Google will tell you it's fucking with things.
Einstein, man of so many words,
Well, he was brilliant. Yeah. They say people who curse are very smart.
Yeah.
But
that was
if he was
said by someone who cusses a lot.
Well, I don't know, man. I need somebody to give me the proof.
Sure.
I'm open to it. I am. I don't believe it right now. I find it an interesting concept. You haven't?
I have not heard a good enough argument to believe it.
But Jeff has.
To believe that the Earth is flat?
Yeah.
No, I don't believe that the Earth is flat. I've not heard a good enough argument. And I've heard arguments that have me really question. This is why I'm pretty firm on space is fake, but not the Earth is flat. Is because I have had some arguments presented to me that were like, wait a minute. Like, some of the information we're getting about space isn't real. Like, for sure. Okay. So that just kind of leads me into that. But I don't believe the Earth is flat.
Those green screen NASA videos really make me scratch my head about.
Those will get you. There's no pictures from space actually will get you, right? The mechanical, if you ever watch, I forget his name, the astronaut that he's doing a talk and he's showing like the capsule, right? And he's talking about if there's a leak, you know, we just turn this thing, and the cameraman even asked him, he's like, wait a minute, you have a mechanical function? Like, how does that work? And the astronaut's even like, well, you know,
Buzz Aldrin.
It wasn't Buzz Aldrin. What? It was another guy. But there's a lot of things that make you wonder. The green screen ISS videos, you know, like the helium thing, the balloons is a big one. Like a lot of satellites on balloons, and you know, internet and telecommunications being ran underwater and underground rather than through satellites. A lot of people don't realize that. Like, you know, you'd be hard pressed to point to anything that you'd have to say like satellites do that, and only satellites do that. So it has to be satellites.
So I believe space is real, but I believe that most of the shit that we say we do in space is fake.
That could also be like I go back and forth. Like, is it even real, right? Or is it like there's a breakaway civilization that we just don't know of, right? Are we just the farm? And then if we could get out there, we realize there's a whole like Star Trek fleet or like something happening that we're just not aware of.
Yeah, that's not necessarily the concept I was going more. I was going more along the lines of like the moon landing and the Van Allen belt, and you know all it's just there's so much. There's so much.
Let me ask you this, right? Like,
reeks of bullshit.
You obviously believe that UFOs are real, right?
Yeah.
Do you believe that Raytheon, etc., have their own versions of these advanced technologies?
Yes.
So do you think that if they've had those technologies that they wouldn't have developed some breakaway civilization, some secret space program by now?
No.
Why not? Basically, why would they just be faking like the moon landings and like simpler things that like us peasants talk about in the zeitgeist? Why wouldn't they also be faking or like doing some shit behind the scenes where it is like they're building a fleet
it's real?
there? Yeah, like they're building like Master Chiefs and like there's a whole fleet.
Let me find out Halo's real.
Right. So the only thing that pokes holes in me saying no is Antarctica. I think if they're doing some shit like that, they're doing it down south, all the way down there. I mean, it's the one place on Earth. I mean, unless there's a gigantic landmass somewhere where nobody fucking knows about, which I honestly think is a pretty good chance, something like a Lemuria kind of thing.
Okay, so so you agree that there is probably a breakaway civilization, at least, maybe not in space, but in Antarctica, in the Hollow Earth, in space, or maybe just on the surface in the Bahamas somewhere we're just not aware of.
Maybe in the Hollow Earth, maybe, but on the surface, no. No, I don't think that there is a breakaway civilization. And I might catch some flack for this, but I've done some recent reading, may or may not have been into Project Paperclip, that I have recently started to think that maybe the Nazis are still around.
Well, yeah, they live in Argentina. Everyone knows that.
Well, no, not like some crippled old. You know, like I'm talking about, like this shit's still going on. That you know, it's not in Germany anymore, right? Mm-hmm. It could, like in the Admiral Byrd story, it seemed like the Nazis were there was groups of people in the Hollow Earth that use the swastika as a symbol. Then there's the theory that there's Nazis in Antarctica.
Well, that's oh, go ahead. Sorry.
If you talk about a technologically advanced group of people, the Nazis were pretty fucking advanced.
Well, yeah, and they took all the scientists in Paperclip, like you said, right? And so did Russia. They took all their scientists over there too. So, you know, and the thing is not all of them, obviously. Like we had talked about this before, right? Like we have to assume that at least one of them were just kind of sucked in because they were a scientist, right? Like Albert Einstein, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. But there was definitely others that were like into the occult findings and the occult stuff as well. And I think that the only way that they knew how to like carry on their situation or whatever was like through cultural things. That's why they had them intermingling with people that started Disney and starting NASA and starting, you know, these psychological programs that the governments were doing to like figure out how to mind control people with TVs and shit like that right at the same time frame. So yeah, I'm totally on board with that shit still going on behind the scenes. That's the breakaway civilization. Shadow government is like the evolution of what that was.
We're going down a lot of rabbit holes here.
We are so far from Hollow Earth. It's crazy.
It's still Hollow Earth, really.
We'll circle back. Don't worry. Jeff, I got a question for you, man. Speaking of the shadow government, do you believe that the shadow government could be Nazis? Like the actual, like the puppet masters behind the scenes of everything.
I think that's okay. Look, man, I would give you like the long, detailed, nuanced answer to that, but it'd be so hard for me to just do that off the cuff, man, to be honest with you. I don't think that the Nazis as we think of them would be those people. No, I think that people that were either descendants or just carriers of the ideology have morphed it into another ideology. Like, you know, they're not going to be walking around in the same uniforms. They're not going to have like a lot of, you know, it's not going to be what you think. It's going to be more like they're just infiltrating other aspects of institutions, right? Like academics and science and medicine. And they're just doing the things like the population control. Like they were, you know, the Nazis were all into like, how do we control populations and eugenics and all this kind of thing. And I think that those ideologies have carried on into things like big pharma. So some of the people that make big decisions at big pharma carry like eugenics ideologies.
Well, it's like, think of like, you know, Bayer Back and Body, right? It's a medication I take for my joints and all that sort of stuff when I start, you know, getting back pains. Bayer is a German company that started off using Jews to experiment on for their medications and stuff. So it's all linked. You know, I agree with Jeff. I don't think it's in the same aspect, because if it was, and they had that sort of like not just FU money, like you know, some politicians have and things like that, and like Bill Gates has and things, right? Where it just like doesn't matter. I have so much money, nothing matters anymore.
They print the money. They are the money.
They have like unlimited money, right? They are the law type situation. If they still had the same sort of ideals and values and stuff as the Nazis in World War II, I wouldn't exist. Because everyone, my grandpa, Alan Schumann, there's no history for the family past him because everyone else died in the Holocaust. So I was adopted. My last name used to be Schumann. Now it's Owens. But I was adopted by my dad. But if that existed, I wouldn't exist, because they would have so much power that they could say every Jew that exists, whether they're partially or fully or whatever it is going to get wiped off the face of the earth. And since that's not happening, I would say that that's not in the whole thing. But I agree with Jeff that the same ideals and passion has been transformed into other things that are just as destructive, but they're more sneaky.
Right, like GMOs or chemtrails, like geoengineering.
Or
right?
just
like
getting people hooked on, you know, painkillers that leads to the death of thousands and thousands of people in the United States a year.
Yeah,
you know,
hundreds of thousands. Yeah, I mean, look, if you think about it, right? Like, I don't want to get into all that, but yeah, just that alone, right? Just like fentanyl, for instance, kills more people, or has killed more people than like World War II. At least Americans, right? It's killed more Americans than World War II or some shit. The number's close, so it's like
it was 400,000 Americans died during World War II, and we lose 450,000 estimated a year to fentanyl.
Something, some crazy stat, right? So, you know, it's not is everything. We're in like fifth dimensional or, you know, like next layer of warfare, right? It's not like what it used to be. In some places, maybe, right? Because the war machine, the military industrial complex that we all know of has to be fed. But there's another military industrial complex that's even deeper than that, right? Like I said, doing the geoengineering, doing the genetic editing stuff and eugenics, like all that crazy shit that's like that's what they're doing now. They're not just like out there marching and like being blatant trying to take over Europe, you know. It's
right. They have control of the entire world because it's the Rockefellers.
Yeah, they've done all that.
So that's honestly the answer that I was thinking that you were going to give me. I totally agree. I don't think you're going to walk around and see Nazis in Nazi uniforms. You're going to see their
some,
descendants.
Right? Let's be real,
yeah, but those are the scumbags walking around now. That's different. Those are neo-Nazis, man. That's not the same shit.
Right? Yeah. Douchebags.
Those are fucking nerds that never did anything with their lives and
Bath
now they're
salts.
racist.
Yeah. So, anyways, no, I totally agree, and that's kind of where I was hoping you would go with it. Like I was saying, you're not going to go down to Antarctica and go to a Nazi base, even if, you know, if they refer to themselves as that. But I'm saying, do you believe that the descendants of Nazis could be in Antarctica and be the puppet masters behind everything?
I personally no, not it's. I don't think it's that cut and dry. No, I think that there's probably multiple factions of multiple powerful factions that are trying to take control at the same time. That's why shit's never going the way that they want it to fully, right? So I think you probably do have groups of descendants of Nazis that do have some advanced tech that probably have high seats in Raytheon or Lockheed, and they probably have access to the Looking Glass or the UFOs or human cloning technologies, and they're doing some crazy shit. But there's also other factions who don't agree with them, who have access because they're with Northrop Grumman and they have some patents for some other shit, and they're involved with some other faction of people, right? I don't think it's so cut and dry. Like the Nazis still run the world, you know.
I think that the Nazis at the time had their hands in so many pockets, right? They had so many companies that, you know, BMW and Bayer and Ford, their branch in Germany, though they try to deny it, use Jewish slave labor, and, you know, Porsche, you know, all these different companies had Nazi slaves, which were, you know, Jews that were shipped out and worked to death and all that sort of stuff. It was absolutely atrocious. But it doesn't take a literal descendant of a Nazi to share in the same ideas and beliefs. So it literally could be anybody. It doesn't have to be the literal grandson of a Nazi.
I don't think he meant descendants
or whatever.
I don't think he meant descendants like genetically. I think he just meant descendants of the ideology.
No, just the ideology.
But I mean, that could be it as well. And I agree with Jeff that there's a lot of companies out there that are in it for whatever reason that they're in it for, that don't have to share the same ideas and stuff. Because I think that if those ideas were running the world, we would see a lot different of a world than we do now. Right now,
you see a pretty fucked up world.
We see a lot of fighting. We see a lot of conflict. And maybe that's different factions fighting against each other at the very, 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 very top. And maybe that's just because the world sucks. You know?
I don't know, man. I honestly, I think that.
Back. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, my bad. I think there's a slight delay there. I got to push back, man. Like, yeah, we see a lot of fighting. We see wars happening. We see this conflict. We think the world's about to fall apart. But just to bring it back to Antarctica, there ain't no fights going on there. There's no fights going on in the International Space Station. We all get along in the International Space Station and Antarctica.
Somehow.
Somehow we're on the brink of nuclear war everywhere else, but in Antarctica, everybody's chilling, bro. Literally, like everybody's chilling in Antarctica.
That's a knee slapper.
Yeah. So there's definitely like a level of theater with like the world being in chaos, and I think it's always in chaos because we're told it's always in chaos. But just like anywhere else, you walk down the street, like it's pretty chill for the most part, depending on where you live. But you know, that's your peers. Yeah. That's your peers fucking up, right? But if your peers aren't fucking up, you can walk around outside and everything's cool, man. Everybody's chilling. There's no wars really, unless the lizard people cause wars. So they can put it on news and they can make $300 billion a year and feed it to their little buddies.
I personally think that the top of the top, the shadow government, the puppet masters, are. I don't believe that there's factions. I don't believe that it's fractured. I believe that it's very structured, and that the world is exactly how they want it right now. I mean, maybe not as fucked up as they want it, but I definitely do believe that they want it fucked, and they're doing a pretty good job at it.
It could be, you know, when you think about things like the Patriot Act, for instance. I know we're getting a little off track here, but when you think about like just literally, like if you think about how technology has evolved in the last like 20 to 30 years, right? Like before in the 90s, there wasn't really cell phones and the internet wasn't really capable of a lot of shit. But as soon as the internet and like cell phones started becoming popular, like the Patriot Act happens because of like chaos, right, in the world. And like that one single thing, the Patriot Act, gave them the ability to collect all the data, so now they can manipulate us with AI and like whatever else they want to do. So it's all orchestrated, in my view, everything along the way. So you might be right, everything might be going exactly how they want it. They just drip the technology to us until they can cause the chaos to be able to suck all the information from the technology they give us, and it repeats. But at the same time, like Jake said, I think that these people are literally, and I've said this on my show a bunch, these people literally are in a death cult, right? So they literally want human sacrifice, and that's how it's always been. That's why there's been cultures that worship human sacrifice forever. And I think that if they had full control, we would be living in a totally different world where like human sacrifice would be like still a normal thing. We'd be like the Maya, you know, showing up every so often to chuck people off the pyramids or whatever they were doing, if that's the true history. But you know,
I don't fully agree. I think that this is how they want it because they still need to get work done. Shit still needs to happen. Things still need to be made, you know, manufactured. You know, food has to be done for them.
Hey, look,
but what's the end goal? What's the end goal, right? Is the end goal like that's the whole point? Like, are they just doing this to carry on a cycle?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we can take care of ourselves, they can live scotch-free and do whatever the fuck they want, whenever the fuck they want to do it.
If you look at this from a Christian perspective, then exactly what you guys are kind of saying is what's going to happen. That there's going to be a beast system. Whoever's at the very top of it is going to demand to be worshipped like God, and whoever doesn't worship him, he's going to execute them. Like, it's in the Bible. So it's like, it's going to get to that point where it's like those people at the very top are going to get exactly what they want. And it's going to be undying servitude and worship as if they're gods. And if they don't get that, then they're going to execute those people. Like literally cut their heads off type stuff. Well, so you know, it's like, you know, it will get to that point eventually, but it's not there yet.
You know, and maybe it is like, you know, if human beings used to live 800 years or 1,000 years, you know, if that's the natural lifespan of what humans are supposed to be, and they've just been over centuries and centuries, they've just been slowly like whittling away at our telomeres or whatever the fuck, you know, so we die in 100 years, you know, they might be just slowly getting us to that point, you know?
Maybe. Well, hey, I hate to be this guy, but it is 9:30 over here, and I have to go to bed soon.
It's your bedtime this time?
4 o'clock comes real early.
All right, let's circle back to Hollow Earth. Yeah, you guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
In the book Hollow Earth by Dr. Raymond Bernard, Bernard cites another book by the author O.C. Hugen. It was Hugen's book, From the Subterranean World to the Sky, Flying Saucers, that Bernard would adopt the belief that saucers don't come from a planet far away in the galaxy, but rather from within the Earth itself. Through his further research, Bernard learned that the true origins of the idea came from a man by the name of Professor Henrique José de Souza, who at one point held the position of president of the Brazilian Theosophical Society. The Brazilian Theosophical Society. It was the professor and a few of his students that really took the idea of flying saucers in the interior of the Earth to a whole other level. Student and commander in the Brazilian Navy, Paulo Justino Strauss, would present a series of lectures in Rio de Janeiro, which claimed that flying saucers came from the world of Agartha in the inner Earth. The men described civilization as rich, spiritual, scientific, and having incredible economic, civil, social, and cultural developments. It was Hugen who would go on to eventually explain that the civilizations of the inner Earth were first created by the lost societies of Atlantis and Lemuria, after they found refuge under the Earth's surface when their continents flooded and eventually sank. It was the Atlanteans who would colonize the inner Earth first, roughly 11,500 years ago, and were eventually joined by the people of Lemuria 2,500 years ago. The Atlanteans were considered to be an extremely technologically advanced civilization who used energy gathered by the atmosphere to propel craft known as vimanas, which were described as being identical to the description of flying saucers. It was these vimanas that aided the safe transportation of all Atlanteans through the cavities of the poles of the Earth into their new subterranean home before their surface home was completely destroyed. Hugen even goes on to explain that these vimanas were most likely only used for interplanetary traveling until we in the exterior world announced our existence with the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. These vimanas were first described in the Indian epic Ramayana, where a celestial craft of sorts from the Vedic period, 1500 to 500 BC, referred to as a vimana, which was a bodily controlled aerial vehicle capable of traveling great distances in a very short amount of time. Eventually, previously mentioned Ray Palmer of the Flying Saucers magazine would tap in and claim that the thought that these flying saucers came from the inner Earth makes more sense than interplanetary travel ever did. He would go on to point out the lack of stories involving space travel from the abduction victims, and that the many stories of being shepherded to another planet could have been the misunderstanding of a simple trip to the interior of the Earth. He also claims that the knowledge of this race of super technologically advanced beings from the inner Earth is well known by the U.S. government, as well as select other throughout the known world. The only reason why the public is unaware is due to the belief that the knowledge of a more powerful and advanced civilization just below our world would send the public into a downfall of political and economical means. But what actual evidence is there that flying saucers come from the inner Earth? One such answer comes in the section of Gray Barker's book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, titled Antarctic Mystery, where Barker claims that one of the reasons for the Antarctic Treaty is due to the abundance of flying saucer sightings from the various research centers and military bases on Antarctica's shores. Barker even goes on to explain that they have been witnessed numerous times ascending and descending from the southern horizon in multiple locations. Theodore Fitch also makes a claim of beings from the Hollow Earth flying around in saucers in his book, Our Paradise Inside the Earth. Quote, They say that they come from other planets, but we doubt it. Bernard summarizes Fitch's message in this book as his explanation that the extraterrestrial cover is a white lie of sorts in order to keep the surface races, military, out of their affairs. To build upon the previously mentioned theory that Atlanteans are the subterranean race, it was very well believed in the early and mid-1900s that Eskimos were the descendants of the Atlanteans. This was mentioned in almost every book I researched on this subject that was published prior to the 1970s. The main idea behind this theory was that due to the proximity of the Eskimo camps and towns, it would only make sense that this was the case. Personally, I don't think this is a very good deduction, and I'm only including it due to the sheer number of researchers that included it in their works. Although the Eskimo idea doesn't seem like a likely answer, one idea that I did find in a few of these early books was the explanation as to why these researchers believed that flying saucers and their pilots did not come from space. Many of these researchers claim that the flying saucer phenomenon really ramped up after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the question that was asked was why. Although we don't know why, we can speculate. One idea that many of the authors shared was that they were worried about us killing ourselves and destroying our planet on the way. But again, why would they care? If they came from outer space and the closest star system to Earth is over 4 light years away, that would put them well out of reach of any side effects from our shenanigans. There would simply be absolutely no way for them to know or care what we did to ourselves. And if they did know or did care, the earliest that they would get here would be 4 years later if they were able to travel at the speed of light. So the conclusion was that they had to be close. But what if they were from our solar system? It's possible, but unlikely, due to the hostile environments on all their planets and moons in our system. But if you put the clues together, the fact that they showed up almost instantly after the first bombing in Hiroshima, and the possible interest in our safety, or at least the planet's safety, then they must be from here. And where else could they hide? And the possibilities were the oceans or the inner Earth. And we are going to stay away from the idea of underwater civilizations because we will dive into that idea heavily in a future episode, as well as the New Age idea that they could be from another dimension for the same reason. But the inner Earth would pose a reason as to why they would care about what we do to the planet. Atomic weapons are incredible pollutants and create very hostile living environments. And for a little while there, and through and forgot to read. And for a little while there, and through different times in history since, it seemed that we may be on the edge of being too trigger happy with atomic or nuclear weapons. With the opening to their world being at each pole and the cavity literally being a gaping hole leading immediately to the atmosphere of the outer Earth, they would have a reason as to why they would want to either monitor or interfere with our aggressions. Thoughts?
Well, the best way. Go ahead. Well, the best way to interfere with our aggressions would be to destroy all of the nuclear weapons, but currently in our arsenal here in North America, according to
Andy Jacobson.
That's it. We have like 1,700, 2,700 nuclear warheads.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're not doing that good of a job.
I mean, this idea that they probably don't live on another planet because the conditions wouldn't be suitable. So they say.
Well, I find it interesting. I find it very possible that these weird things that we see in the sky come from our planet. I find it very possible that they come from the inside of our planet. Now, whether or not they're coming from science holes at the north or south, that's up for debate, especially when you get into the topic of unidentified submerged objects, which we'll talk about at some point. And we talked about it when we covered the, what was it? The Shag Harbor incident, right? We talked about that a little bit in the Shag Harbor incident. We'll dive heavily into it later on. There could be numerous holes to the hollow earth under the ocean, and these things could easily find their way to the surface through any one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree for sure. Definitely agree. I just don't know if like them coming from the hollow earth is necessarily the case, or if like that's just relative. Like maybe they're just coming from hollow earth from our perspective. Maybe that wasn't where they're originating from, but they're just there now.
They're going through portals.
Maybe they're going through portals, exactly. Or maybe they just set up a colony there, but they're from some other dimension or some other place, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's, I still like the idea that maybe the Earth or the moon perhaps is a mothership, right? Really like the moon. If you think about the orbit of the moon and how perfect it is and the size and just all these things, like it's possible that an advanced civilization millions or billions of years ago set that perfect size object in the perfect orbit around this almost suitable planet and terraformed it that way. And over 1 million years or so, like here we are. And maybe, those beings are coming from the hollow moon or the hollow earth, and it's just a giant mothership. If you're going to travel long distances, like interstellar distances, if you can't go the speed of light, which probably can't, let's be real, the only way you're going to do that is like multi-generationally. And the only way you're going to do that is on a massive ship. And the best way to do that is a planet.
Yeah.
Well, the air's out of this tire. So we'll move on. But I don't know, for some reason when you were saying that, Jeff, it came to my mind, we need to cover the Black Knight satellite at some point.
Oh yeah.
We really need to cover that. I doubt there's any good literature on it, but I'll try to find it. That's a topic we need to cover.
There's good claims. I've heard people talk about it with what sounds like some authority, but who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys ready to wrap this up?
Yeah.
I got my last section here. I'm just warning everybody that I'm going to fuck up some pronunciations in this one. So get ready. Yeah, this one's, we'll see. Agartha. There are many origins of the name Agartha that I found in my research. By digging a little deeper, it seems that a practicing occultist of Russian origin named Helena Blavatsky was the first to use the name Agartha to describe and pinpoint the actual location of the Buddhist paradise of Shambhala. But there are tons of different origin stories for Agartha. For example, according to author Dr. Raymond Bernard, Shambhala is the capital city of Agartha, and Agartha is a blanket name for the entire subterranean empire. And in this capital, the Hollow Earth, hails the king of the world, who is the supreme ruler of the entire Agarthan empire. It is this king who sends messages to the surface via tunnels that extend to the monks in Tibet in the east, and once to ancient Brazil in the west, with stories of possibly another tunnel system reaching out to the pyramids of Giza. This king of the world was a very prominent figure in the lore of Agartha, and is said to have been from Venusian descent. In the book Lost Continents and the Hollow Earth by authors David Hatcher Childress and Richard Sharp Shaver, the authors quote the May 1964 issue of Amazing Stories as saying that this king, quote, came from the planet Venus to be the instructor and guide of our then just dawning humanity. He was said to have been thousands of years old while looking as if he was a teenager in the standards of earthly humans. Then there is the previously mentioned theory that the kingdom of Agartha is really the new home of the Atlanteans who settled in the inner world after losing their lands in a nuclear war that destroyed most of all other life on Earth. With this being the reason why they live in peace instead of war, like we do on the surface, in the land of the new Atlanteans, war is the history that they learned from, and the history that destroyed their previous advanced civilization on the surface of the planet. The lore of many cultures around the world highlights a land of harmony and perfection with an advanced, sometimes immortal race of beings which are believed by many to be the New Age Atlanteans. Hyperborea, in Greek mythology, is land to the extreme north populated by people of a 7 to 10 foot stature. It was ancient explorers like Pytheas who would claim to venture close to the land of Hyperborea, which called the North Pole home. Similar lore in other parts of the world reflect aspects of the Agarthan world as well. Lore from places such as the Indian epic of Ramayana, or the ancient Chinese story of 3 divine teachers, or the 3 pure ones, who traveled by aerial vehicles. These were the 3 highest gods of Taoism and were associated with the sky, the earth, and the underworld, as well as the Inca dynasty of Manco Capac, who was said to be the first governor and founder of the Inca civilization, who in one epic emerged from the cave of Pacaritambo, and it is the belief that Manco Capac himself was the child of the sun god, who called him to the surface of the planet to lead the Incan people. The question is, what sun was this god a god of, if Manco Capac came from the deep caverns of the underworld? Then there is the lore surrounding Quetzalcoatl, the deity of Aztec legend. Quetzalcoatl was described as being much different than the Mesoamericans that sought his wisdom. He was described as pale, tall, and bearded, very different from those that worshipped him. He was said to have arrived on a flying apparatus and eventually left the same way he came. Legends and lore from these and many other cultures around the world hold hints of an underground advanced civilization, polar paradises, or gods who traveled through the sky in incredible vehicles. Could these all have been stories of people, places, and technology of Agartha? How about other cultures that told of a land of paradise and incredible life? In Greece, this place was known as Mount Olympus. Besides Shambhala, the Vedic times also referred to other heavenly places, such as Ratnasanu, Hermadri, and Mount Meru. In Scandinavia, there was the land of Asar, mentioned in the Eddas, and the Amanti in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. There was the city of the 7 petals of Vishnu. The ancient kingdom of Edom had the city of the 7 kings. There was the Eden of Judaic tradition, the Tibetan Shangri-La, the land known as Alberti to the Persians. Hebrews have Canaan, and Tula of ancient Mexico, Mayapan of the Aztec civilization, El Dorado of the Spanish conquistadors, Dua or Dunada to the Celts, Shivan of ancient China. How about the Isle of Avalon, Walhalla, or Gotterdammrung? Besides the many different highlights of possible hints of Agartha through our world's lore, there is well-developed descriptions of the Agarthan world itself, specifically all the Agarthan civilizations. According to Dr. Raymond Bernard, quote, "There is no age in Agartha and no death. It is a society in which everyone is young-looking, even for many centuries or even thousands of years of age. He goes on to explain that all Agarthans are free of disease as well. In Agartha, there is no such thing as marriage. The sexes live separately and do not depend on each other. The children are all born by asexual means and are more often born female by virgin mothers. In the civilizations of Agartha, female is the dominant gender, and the majority of the subterranean kingdoms are patriarchal in nature. There are no specific mothers per specific child. Raising children is a communal task, and certain special individuals are dedicated as teachers who guide the children into being carbon prints of their ancestors instead of highlighting individuality. The people are smarter in Agartha, and it is thought that due to their larger stature, this would also equal a larger headspace, and when applying a scale and a similar brain matter structure of a modern human, add the fact that their genitals do not require as much blood flow as ours do, and therefore can send precious oxygen-filled blood to their craniums instead, you get a larger brain with more capacity and a richer oxygen supply. Therefore, the belief is that they are much smarter than us. I mean, they are the race that developed the flying saucer. The diet of Agarthans is primarily vegetarian, relying mostly on sweet fruits. Their diet is completely free of any meat, eggs, seafood, tobacco, coffee, alcohol, and salt. Some more modern groups have also delved into the idea of the inner world. The 17th century Rosicrucianism of Europe was a spiritual and cultural movement that delved deeply into the world of the esoteric. I quote Bernard in their belief of an inner truth to the world. Quote, "The road that leads to the blessed land, this invisible world, this esoteric and occult domain, constitutes the central quest and master key of all mystery teachings and systems of initiation in the past, present, and future." He goes on to explain that this magic key is the only way to unlock a new and marvelous world. This key was referred to by the Rosicrucians with the French word vitriol, which was an acronym for the sentence Visita interiora terrea rectificando invenis omnia lipidem, which means, in the interior of the earth is hidden the true mystery. And that's it, gentlemen.
Sounds like a vegan's wet dream to me.
Yeah, there's always like a lot of that, with a lot of this, like, I guess you could label it new age. I heard you use that term a few times. And that kind of throws me off a little bit. It always makes me think that it's just some new age, chick reading crystals and is like coming up with all this stuff, Not that I totally discredit all of that, but
I discredit all that.
I mean, I don't.
I want to find some people with those healing crystals and pop them right in the face and be like, "All right, how do you feel?"
Now hold this crystal.
Yeah, hold the crystal. Tell me how you feel.
I think that's another one of those things like we were talking about earlier, where it's like, if you think that it heals you, you miss the plot. And unfortunately, a lot of people who carry them in their pockets miss the plot. But
see, this would have been a good section to have CJ on for.
Mm-hmm.
He would have argued this. He probably would have ate that up. All right. Well, during that last stint, we lost half of our listeners or our audience. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they come here for the bickering and not the actual script. I get it. Well, that's it, gentlemen. That is 4 weeks, an entire month worth of Hollow Earth. Yeah, Jake hated it. I know that.
I didn't hate it. I like the story of it.
Yeah?
I think that, I don't know, I'm not impartial, or I think that's the right word. I'm not against the idea of the earth being hollow and things like that. I mean, shoot, I think that hell's in the center of the earth. That's just me. But it's like, you know, I don't know. It's definitely interesting. There's definitely a lot of baloney surrounding it. There's definitely a lot of theories surrounding it. But the problem is that I just like, I don't know, 1 or 2 episodes ago, when Jeff is like, "Oh, how depressed are you?" Because I was like, it doesn't matter, because we're never going to be able to see it. We're never going to be able to interact with it. You know, it's going to be under lock and key for forever. I certainly hope that at the end of our lives, we get access to more knowledge than we have now, that we can see if indeed the earth is flat or if indeed the earth is hollow, things like that. But for the time being, dude, it's like, it's interesting. I'd like to think about it and just be like, you know, theorize about it and all that sort of stuff. But I truly believe that if the earth is hollow, we will never know in our lifetime, because the governments of the world will have that thing under lock and key and will not allow that information to get out, because if that information gets out, then that means that people are going to try to go and see it for themselves. In the same way I gave the example of visiting the crystal caves here close to Menominee. You couldn't touch anything, you know, in some areas there was no flash photography, right? All sorts of stuff, because God forbid you touch a stalactite and it ruins the growth of the stalactite forever, because the oils of your finger destroy the mineral flow and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
We would never be allowed to go there. So it's like, but on the other side of that, you know, we have things today where they're trying to recreate the mammoths. If the inner earth existed and it did have mammoths, they would just go in there and snatch up a few and then come back and throw them out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that. So there's 2 sides of that coin. But I don't know. It's definitely interesting. I definitely enjoy the story. I didn't particularly care for the Admiral Byrd diary. I thought that was kind of far-fetched and kind of silly. But the rest of it was actually fairly interesting. And this last episode, I think you did a banger. It really kind of gave me some head scratchers. Certainly when it came to the migration of the animals, because the animals migrating north versus south is kind of strange, because we know that south is towards the equator, which means warmer. But if they're going north, shouldn't be that, right? So that's definitely interesting for sure.
Good, man. Yeah, there was a reason why I left this one for last. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with this, whoever Gamboots is in the chat, that it's probably like these underground subterranean caves, right? Like, it's just probably massive caverns. It's probably not a hollow earth, you know, as you think of it when you hear the term. It's probably just more like a honeycomb earth, just massive caverns. And they're probably, I like to think, and I hope there is, advanced civilizations down there, you know, Atlanteans, hope, whatever it is, time travelers, interdimensionals. I hope that that's happening, because that's way cooler than just like the core and the inner core and the mantle and like volcanoes and shit.
Yeah,
that there's nothing, right?
Yeah, it's just
boring.
dirt and rocks.
That's boring as shit, dude.
You know, when Gamboots left that comment there, I instantly thought, like, dang, man, we just talked about that exact same concept like 2 episodes ago. Actually, I think that episode's coming out tomorrow. It might be part 3, but I'm pretty sure that was part 2. Jeff, you had brought that up. And, you know, after you had brought that up, I was thinking about it after the recording, and I was like, you know, it's probably a thing, you know, because we talked about that land that was discovered in somewhere in China, where they uncovered like this entire ecosystem under the ground where like the roof of it caved in, and now you can see down into it, or something along those lines, right? Forgive me for my ignorance if I'm incorrect on that, but I know that there is something that they discovered, and it has a Jurassic Park, or a I don't know if anybody has ever read the book Fragment by Warren Fay. It's kind of the same concept as Jurassic Park, but it has to deal with known animals evolving on the island, kind of like Darwin's finches,
the Galapagos and stuff. Yeah,
it's very, very similar to that, but it's vicious. It's absolutely like these little ants turn into like sand dollar things. They have the exact same DNA as a typical ant, but they spin on their sides, and they just cut people and things up and tear them to shreds and bring like their little body parts back to their little ant hills and stuff.
I don't know why I'm getting Tremors vibes.
But that's kind of what the that whole cavity that opened up in China reminded me of. And to think that there is something like that close enough to the surface, why can't there be something like that in the earth as well? You know, like a honeycomb kind of thing, I believe was the word that Jeff brought up that time.
Yeah, you've got billions, well, apparently you've got billions of years of lava flows and all that kind of shit, right? Erosion and tectonic plate movements. So of course there's gonna be massive caverns in there, right? Now the question is there anything, I wouldn't even say is there anything living in there? I'm sure there is, at least microbials and other shit, right? But the question is there advanced beings living down there?
No. I think so. I think so. I think so. I think throughout my research, you know, I did a ton of research. Like I said in episode 1 of this, I basically researched this for a solid year straight, on and off, to come up with all this stuff. There's a whole section that I cut out of it just because it was so freaking stupid. Maybe, you know, there's enough stuff to do a part 5 somewhere down the road, and I very much might do that. But I really do think that I like the idea of the weird shit we see in the sky, if they're not military, right?
Mm-hmm.
From not just us, but any culture or nation on this planet. I find it extremely plausible that they could be from the inner Earth, especially if you add the concept of them going in and out of the oceans. I don't necessarily believe in science holes, but I think that there definitely can be cavities. And if there's cavities, I think there's life. If there's life, there could be intelligence. Enough intelligence to create a flying saucer and fly it to the surface? I don't know. But I like that idea more than flying saucers from another planet, or even, you know, like I do believe in multiple dimensions. Like I believe that concept. I just don't know if I believe in the technology to go in between them. So the hollow earth concept is something that really makes the UFO thing make sense to me.
That's fair.
So, you know, like we said multiple times on this show, I think we're all kind of on board with we don't necessarily believe that they come from a planet far, far away. I think they could be from here.
Yeah, no, we definitely have the same, I don't know, beliefs or reasoning that they don't come from a planet far, far away. But where you say they come from inner Earth and the technology to travel interdimensionally, where I would say is that they are interdimensional beings. They don't need any sort of technology because they do it naturally. Right. Angelic beings, demonic beings, that sort of stuff. But I don't know.
Yeah, would we classify
I'm going to
them
stand
as
by
Earthlings?
what I said originally. It would be really cool to find out. What's that?
Would they be Earthlings or would they be aliens?
Well, I mean, we consider people from outside of the country aliens, so I mean, it depends on what your definition is, I suppose. You know, they would be interdimensionals if they're from an interdimensional being. They'd be interdimensionals.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw off your train of thought.
No, it's cool. No, but man, you completely wrecked my train of thought. I'm sorry. Dude. It's gone. It doesn't matter anymore.
Got him.
No, I would like the idea of the inner Earth to exist, but I'll stand by my original statement, which is that I don't believe we would ever find out if it did or did not exist. I actually, as a matter of fact, I think that if it gained a lot of traction, we'd most likely hear that it didn't exist in order for people to, especially with what's going on in Congress these days, where they're talking about the UFOs and saying, "Oh, well, I don't know what that is." It's all hush hush. You can't say what it is, right? It's national security type stuff. So of course, oh, well, I have no idea. We'll talk about it in a closed session. That's what they always say. So in that light, they would definitely say that it doesn't exist, and people would be like, well, they were truthful about the aliens, so I guess they're truthful about the hollow earth, right? So they would just say it doesn't exist, and people would be like, oh, well, I guess that settles it.
Yeah.
You know, in the current time frame of things that are going on, I do love for sure in the congressional hearings when they're like, we'll talk about it in a closed session. And it's just like, that means yes. You know?
Yeah. Pretty much. It's like, we can't say it, but we're gonna say it. But
yeah,
no. But yeah,
I didn't want to say this in front of everybody, but no, it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
right. They just go behind closed doors and tell everybody no. Yeah.
Gamboot says, wasn't there a segment on Shadowban maybe about UAP technology capable of flying, then diving underwater could be part of a subterranean civilization? Yeah,
we were kind of touching on that a little while ago, maybe like half an hour ago, that it could be underwater or underground. I mean, we're talking about the civilizations underground now, but yeah, I mean, obviously, if it's capable of doing the things in the air that it's doing, defying the laws of physics, there's no reason it couldn't do that underwater or in space or whatever, right?
So, yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely technology. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head any technology for sure, but I could definitely point to like other patents, like the TR-3B, right? It's like the best one because it's literally a patent for a triangular spacecraft that Raytheon holds. And it's like, okay, what the fuck is that? What is that?
Jeremy, calm down.
It's rave
time. I
don't
know what it did. I hit the wrong button.
But it's bedtime for everybody, I think.
Dude, I'm the beat.
Yeah. All right. Well, that has wrapped up our month-long coverage of Hollow Earth. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. I put a ton of work into it. I know a lot of it was a little dry, but the concept of Hollow Earth can be a little dry, especially when you get into all the minor details and the history of it. But I literally scraped the bottom of the bucket for everybody and brought what I could. Thank you, everybody who has taken the time to listen to the Infinite Rabbit Hole in the last 4 years, for giving us the purpose to be here still 4 years after Jake and I first stepped up to the microphones and made complete fools out of ourselves. Really, really appreciated. Huge. I'm out of words. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
3-year Jeff.
Yeah. Thanks, man. It's been fun.
Thanks, bro. Like, shoot, man. Come on.
It's been fun, man.
All right. Well,
good time.
That there, everybody, has been another episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. Next week, we I don't know what we're going to do yet. It's going to be one of two things. You're either getting our post Elmwood episode, so you'll get our post UFO Days episode and hear about our thoughts and feelings of the UFO Days festival, or you will be getting our very first episode in our archive series, which we'll dive into probably in a post on Facebook. So watch Facebook and look for the archive series and see what that's all about. But without further ado, everybody, that has been another episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and I'll see you in the next fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Adios.
Jeff, you have to stop it.
Oh, I have the button. I forgot.